This week on The Race, we're evaluating the contenders vying to lead the ANC come December. Joining Lumkile Monde, commentator and broadcaster Karima Brown, along with journalist Richard Poplak from the Daily Maverick. Richard, let me start with you. One of the respondents saying that Cyril Ramaphosa is perceived to be the most suited to steer, and I quote, an unsteady ship. What do you read into that?
Well, I'll take his word for it, or her word for it. Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of name recognition, I think Cyril's is very, very strong. The deputy president obviously has been in the public eye a lot of late. There does seem to be a lot of sort of residual respect swirling around his name. Of course, the defects are Marikana, and to an astonishing extent, the Buffalo purchasing incident of 2012.
Still an overhang, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's remarkable how that single animal has sort of hung around and entered the ANC race. It should, maybe it should get a T-shirt.
Karima Brown, Cyril Ramaphosa, many would also say, in recent weeks has started to find his voice assume a stride. What is that voice, and is the momentum there, do you think?
Well, certainly over the weekend, he probably spoke more strongly about what is happening in the country and in the ANC than he's ever done before. Many people have argued that he is still too timid, that he doesn't have the grit, you know, to run a race in which President Zuma have of course redefined all the rules. But we've seen that, you know, he's genuinely got skin in the game. He's coming to the table, speaking out really, really strongly. But I think the tactic that I also thought was clever on the part of his managers was to play to the conspiracy theories that are happening around him in the party. And of course, President Jacob Zuma really adroit and good at managing that kind of talk. And what they've done is they've kind of stripped that thing bare of its, you know, secrecy, so to speak, and its codedness, and put it out in the open. So essentially putting the balls, you know, firmly in President Jacob Zuma's court.
Lumkile, of the attributes that we've just put on the screen right now, I would suggest to you that the last one is probably, in this current political dynamic, the most important. But can he do that? Unify the alliance?
It's very difficult because we all know that the rot is deep within the movement. I mean, you see it at local level. We had an incident in the Free State in the past week. So it's really a call for a party that's got an amazing history and a very good brand, and it needs that leader. So he's got his work cut out, and I hope if he does win in December, that he'll be ready to do that job. Because Zuma, if you remember, in 2007, he had stood on the same ticket, that's unifier, and he's failed dismally around that.
Richard, Jeff Radebe, again, one respondent saying is that he is seen as a spin doctor for the presidency, and that would cast a shadow over his ability to do the job. There's an element of truth there, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Radebe is a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. He's, you know, he's in the mix to draw maybe some noise and some fire, but no, I don't think he has a hope in heck.
Karima, is his heart in it?
I think that Jeff Radebe is playing to the idea that he needs to be among the most senior people able to wield some kind of influence when that horse trading starts happening. As you know, Jeremy, the structure of the ANC's top six is not final. At conference, before voting starts, they actually have to vote on whether they're going to enlarge that structure or not. And I think Jeff Radebe is, you know, playing to that possibility. So he believes that he is going to be one of those individuals that will be able to do some of the kind of tap dancing and trading, horse trading that's going to happen. And I think that, you know, he does have pockets of support around the country, but the important thing is who will he kind of leverage, you know, off, and that's going to be the interesting thing. And of course, how far down on that top six he comes in on.
Lumkile, you made the point a little earlier that respondents only had a shortened period of time to respond to Zweli Mkhize. The point is also made, though, by one of the people interviewed that he's only really famous in Durban, but possibly the obscurity is seen as a positive.
It is seen as a positive in one sense, in the sense that, you know, because they don't know about him, they can give him a chance. However, I must remember that it's a popular movement. each ANC being a populist movement, it requires somebody who's well known and who resonates with ANC members, but also better society. So in that case, I think he's going to have his work cut out as well. But more importantly, Jeremy, remember that with the books that have come out to public, it is very, very clear that he's very close to the current president as an ambassador to try and clean up the mess that has happened in the process. So he's going to have to work very, very hard to have a legitimacy as a national leader and somebody who can unify the ANC.
Richard Poplak, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is seen as efficient. Some of the respondents saying that she had done a commendable job as the head of the African Union, but the blight is the association with her husband. So it really is if you buy that argument, it really is a balancing act for her.
Yeah, when you dig into the literature, there were actually some really fascinating responses to her credentials and to her tenure in the African Union buildings. You know, it's often thought of by people who spend a lot of time thinking and sort of following what happened in African politics during her tenure. She was loathed in that position. I mean, you know, ambassadors didn't get the chance to see her. She was widely reviled in that position, to say nothing of the fact that she was basically forced through by the South African government against the wishes of the rest of the members of the union. But many of the respondents looked at her tenure there in a very positive light. So in terms of her credentials, it seems that she's viewed very, very positively. And of course, there's the association issue, which is a huge negative.
So, Karima, two things. First of all, is the AU performance, whether it was good or bad, important? But secondly, if you look at the screen, we've got a quote up here, and it's that last line which is interesting, but she's quite brave. Answer those two questions for me.
Look, I mean, that quote is typical of ANC mythology. Remember, we are polling ANC members.
Yes.
Lumkile and I were making a joke in the off-air discussion that a lot of the values that we see here are values that are quite coded and that we associated with when we were youngsters, and that's, of course, 100 years ago. But I think that there is this perception that she did well at the African Union, and as Richard said, and I agree with him, she didn't do well. In fact, she was seen by many of her African counterparts as an absentee landlord, if you like. She was constantly in South Africa, you know, kind of getting her campaign together. And the issue around being brave, I'm not sure what that is about, whether she was brave to have been married or divorced President Jacob Zuma, or whether she was brave for being in the government. But I think what ANC popular culture does is draw a relationship of essentialness between tenure and solidness, and that obviously isn't necessarily borne out by the facts. You know, just because you've been around for long doesn't mean you're necessarily a good leader.
Richard, take a look at the quote. I like her a lot, but she's related to Zuma. If she wasn't close to the president, she would have been #1. Again, that association could be a killer.
Yeah, that association, I believe, is a killer. The other thing is that I've seen her campaigning, as I'm sure everyone here has, and she is totally uninspiring.
Not at all.
So perhaps I think as she continues to do the rounds in the next couple of months, she'll lose more and more of that populist support as people sleep through her campaign events.
Lumkile, Lindiwe Sisulu, and I hope no one ever says this about me, so people saying she's performed well as a housing minister, but apparently soft in character, and she gives cues of weakness. This is C-U-E-S, cues of weakness. What are those cues of weakness?
Well, I mean, she hasn't shown any strong leadership in the areas where she's been. Remember, she was the Minister of Defense, and she spent more time in the 17 malls. So they've been seen, I think a lot of the ANC members haven't seen a lot of that leader that they would like to see who will be able to unify. But more importantly, Jeremy, is the issue around her parents. That, you know, her parents, both Albertina and Walter, are stalwarts. And therefore, there's an issue which was raised by some of the focus group around the monarchy. That, you know, if you look at Nkosazana Zuma and you look at Sisulu, these are monarchy. And our movement is not about monarchy. It's a movement of the people.
So that, Karima, very quickly, that could count against her, as well as the perception of having a soft character.
Yeah, it was interesting when I spoke with one of the other presidential hopefuls, I won't mention names, and I spoke about Lindiwe's possibilities and candidacy. The person said to me, Lindiwe is nice. And of course, you know, that is how men describe women often, whom they think are not necessarily their opponents. But I think the reflection on Lindiwe is very much a kind of way in which patriarchy manifests inside the African National Congress. If one is saying Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma has been around, Lindiwe has been around, she's served in almost all of the cabinets, she's held really incredibly senior positions. Her performance there, is a matter for another discussion. But if tenure is an indicator, like it was with Nkosazana, as being solid, then she ought to be posting solid. But because a lot of the male respondents spoke of her, in patriarchal terms, I'm not surprised that she's polling like this in the focus group.
I still want the trio's views on Matthews Posa and Baleka Mbete, and when the race continues, how do then the top contenders maintain course? And what about those lagging behind, but all with big ambitions? This is The Race.